honor. I hope you can hear me. Okay.
Yes, very well.
Thanks a lot. So it is an honor to be back at Jamia. As you've said, I've kind of been speaking at various kind of conferences here before. So I'll just take this opportunity to thank Professor Zaidi, Professor Malhotra, Professor Shimi Monidole, and of course, kind of really looking forward to an engagement with Siddhartha, my co-plenary speaker. And I see that Astrid is also in the audience, and I'm just kind of saying in like hi to you because we haven't been speaking for a long time, but then we've kind of been friends for a while. And also thanks all of you who have kind of taken the time and trouble to come and listen to me. I'll start with a disclaimer. I'm slightly under the weather today, so do bear with me. If you have any questions, please just kind of interrupt me if I go too fast. But I'm not really somebody who works on e-learning, but I've always had to be associated with e-learning because of the fundamental role it plays in understanding how video games tell stories. And the very early work of kind of people who've worked on video games has always kind of overlapped with e-learning. Mine, Astrid's also included, and of course people who've done such fantastic work before and after. But so I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. Kind of quickly, very quickly, let me just see if I can get this slideshow to work. Just bear with me a second. Okay, just 1 second. So, always me and Zoom, we're never friends. So, right. So here's what I call my presentation. I call it Untitled. You can see the misspelling on purpose, but I call it Untitled. I'm also going to play with the word elit and elite, because there is some literature which is considered elite and some that is not, but we will talk about that more. But yes, so this is my untitled presentation on electronic literature in India. And I'm going to start by saying that I've never realized that it was kind of so kind of fascinating, sort of so nice to have to eat one's own words, because in 2017, actually Sandy Baldwin had put me up to it. So I'd kind of written an essay called No Country for Elit, punning it on the movie of the No Country for Old Men. But of course, the essay was kind of like an initial kind of foray into thinking about elit in India, and it was looking at kind of it was published with many other essays on kind of globalizing electronic literature and an issue of hyper-res, and there were articles on Hispanic elit, Arabic elit, oral literature traditions in Ghana, and there was my No Country for Elit. But I'd started by kind of identifying how there were so many rich hypertextual oral traditions, pre-digital traditions in India, such as the Kavad. Those of you who don't know the Kavad, it is this fantastic box which is painted with kind of panels, and you open the panels one by one, and you unfold the story, and you can read it in multiple different ways, I think. Also Kavad, then the Harikatha, then the Dastan Goi, all of these I thought were kind of, the elit had its antecedents, the hypertextual rather had its antecedents in these already in India. But India was, at that point when I was writing it, I wasn't able to find too many instances of elit, although there were some, and I'll come to this, some that I even missed back then. And compared to the kind of situation of IT in India with global developments in elit, I was kind of doing that kind of comparison. India was like it made a rather late entrance into the world of computers in the 1990s. Those of us who were who were kind of around then will remember how computers kind of came to our schools in the 1990s, and it was kind of the computers were generally, at least in my family, were always associated with kind of work and not play. So I'm kind of like a black sheep, I guess, because I mainly use my main work is playing on the computer. So well, then again, I was kind of looking at current studies and also trying to summarize, what was happening in digital literature in terms of e-zines, and also talking about the lack of interactive fiction and poetry. And I was also trying to indicate the way forward for Elit. And that I'm sure all of us will be doing here and elsewhere. But the reason why I said I had to eat my words was that because like shortly after, I was introduced to this fantastic person called Shanmuga Priya, and she said, "I've read your essay, No Country for Elit, and it's really nice and stuff." So I was kind of okay. But then she showed me something that she'd made. It was this kind of electronic poetic installation called the Water Cave. This was an absolutely different kind of scenario. We were talking about digital humanities, cartography, things like that. But she then came up with this Water Cave, which you can see a little bit of it there, the text kind of flowing through the cave. And it was really fascinating. And you can see Shanmuga Priya with Andy Campbell and with the support of the awesome Professor Nirmala Menon at IIT Indore, kind of. And of course, there were other, like I said, I missed the SMS novel, The Cloakroom. Of course, it was published by, I think, Rupa, but they were quite kind of unsure of what the appeal would be and whether it would be popular. In fact, I read this newspaper article very recently on this cloakroom when I was Googling it, and a very reputed author, I won't quote, I won't say the name here, but said that yes, it's a great idea, but I will never read it. So all of that. But then there was also something that really happened, which I have to give a shout out to somebody called Samya Brata Roy. I'm sure he's here somewhere. This was absolute love's labor, self-funded and kind of like self-supported work by somebody who was, I think, then a master's student. And he single-handedly built this Elit network. It's a WhatsApp group at the moment. And I sincerely think that it needs much more kind of presence. But how a WhatsApp group could be deployed to connect researchers and establish a network in global South-South contexts so effectively was something that I really learned from Shamo. And it's fascinating how it's still going on, and then it supports people who are writing about literature, electronic literature. Of course, around this time also, there was this promise of an electronic literature anthology. I'm not sure if it is out yet, but there was one by the IIT Indore, called KSHIP, IIT Indore. So I'm kind of still, I haven't seen it yet, but it might be out already. And of course, then there was kind of the discussions of first wave and second wave Elit in India. And this is again very interesting for me, because I wonder what is the first wave and what is the second wave. Does even a distinction like that hold? But we can talk about it later. And then my co-panelist here, Siddhartha Chakraborti, kind of presented this. He organized this workshop at Aligarh Muslim University, and Siddhartha has been doing, sorry, I kind of just use the name I usually call him by, but Siddhartha has been doing fascinating work from a long time. I mean, we met back, many years back in JNU, about 10 years ago, but he's been working on electronic literature, he's been working on digital literature for a long time. And then, of course, if we're talking about digital literature, digital humanities and digital literature, I mean, some names just have to be mentioned, and I'm sorry, I'm just kind of using this space to, but these people need your applause. These people need kind of the recognition that they don't often get. But I would want to mention Padmini Ray Murray, without whose kind of work digital humanities in India wouldn't have taken the shape as it has. Nirmala Menon, Dibodhuti Roy, Maya Dodd, Professor Simi Malhotra, Shimi Monidole, and Professor Zaidi as well, and others from Jamia. But there are many others as well whom I haven't named, whom I've maybe missed out here. But this is, so all of these happened. And I'm so happy that I had to eat my words, really, that it is certainly becoming a place for Elit, and not more than a place, really. It's becoming places. It's a multiverse kind of a thing for, I mean, the scenario in India. And with that, however, I mean, I had a few thoughts, really. Where is this going, and why are we not seeing Elit or as much as we should, really? Or how are people perceiving Elit outside this group here? I can see that we are a very, very strong kind of very large group of people presented, so many papers being presented. But what else is happening out there besides, you know, what we are saying and doing? Anyway, so very quickly, I mean, when I started teaching at Presidency University, I'm no longer there, but I was started teaching English. I started teaching the classics with this book called Twiterature. And it was fun because, I mean, people were scandalized. They were like totally kind of not going to do it, because actually I just found the Romeo and Juliet thing, but what I was teaching was Homer, and kind of Homer with Twitter was kind of absolutely shocking, especially in a bastion of classical learning such as Presidency College University, formerly Hindu College. So it was, but then what happened was that, you know, with the digital kind of started taking hold. I mean, we were just talking about whether Twitter is more popular than Facebook, or in a previous question answer session, but not going into all that. I was just saying that Facebook can also be a very, very powerful kind of medium for deploying, like we deployed for telling stories, as we realized, because after a kind of the problems that I faced by using Twiterature, kind of not so kind of much later, we had the Presidency University Literary Society, PULSE, starting this thing called microfiction. So they were basically, what they were doing is kind of, they were influenced by all the digital storytelling and that we were talking about earlier, into doing a digital literature contest. It was basically like a Scrabble of storytelling. So people would tag each other with words, and they would have to kind of write write stories based on the kind of words that were. So from there, of course, I mean, this, and I'm grateful to Shama for sharing this with me. But this, from there, we've moved much further. We've moved to stories which are told in twine, and this is the story called The Good Citizen by Pankhuri. And you can see that there are these multiple options. So this is getting really hypertextual, from kind of, let's say, being kind of skeptical about Twitter as a storytelling medium, to adopting Facebook as something which you could kind of tell stories into. Interestingly, we're moving into a realm where, we're moving into an area where we're seeing kind of hypertextual stories being written, again, with using twine, RenP, what have you. In fact, I mean, coming back to Presidency, some of my students wrote a full kind of, a mini novel on the professors of Presidency using RenP, the English department. I mean, I said, well, I can't share that with you because it's funny in ways which I guess, we shouldn't be discussing here, but it's kind of interesting that the technology kind of gets to us, and we're using, these are being used and being more and more common. Actually, I did look at kind of quite a few, about, let's say, 20 to 25 kind of digital stories that were shared amongst kind of the Elit community in India. And Shamo was kind enough to share it, as I just mentioned. So it's happening. And then I kind of just listen to your papers on Insta poetry and things. So it's happened. But Uh, then, of course, kind of one of the things is to understand is that how do we understand digital literature, and how does it connect with ELIT, right? Because I mean, where are we drawing the boundaries? What are we kind of where are we looking at the commonalities, and how are we kind of when we're talking about digital literature in India, are we talking about ELIT? Because like when I said no country for elite back then, it was there was digital literature, or it was kind of defined as e-zines, or basically like more like print literature, but in kind of digital forms, not literally like not born digital kind of media. So it was digitized literature. I mean, there are some people, many people, as the majority, who who still think of PDFs as digital literature. So they think that they're reading digital literature when they're reading ebooks. So this is also something I wanted to address. That this is the larger kind of perception, really. And then there's, of course, I mean, since I work on digital games myself, I mean, there's this age-old connection with digital games and ELIT. And on the left here, you have this image, you have this verse from Zork. Actually, the original is a textual novel, right? There are no images there. This image is kind of generated by fans using CGI. But it starts with you are standing in an open field west of a White House with a boarded front door. There's a small mailbox there. And what you do is basically takes the story forward. And Zork is a game, really. It's a computer game. Only it's not a game which shows people kind of with high-end visuals or shooting or moving around. So just again, a quick disclaimer: computer games are of many different kinds. There is no one computer game. So we're just kind of talking about computer games and violence earlier. So there's all of these kind of nuances really in thinking about games themselves. But so then how does ELIT in India connect with digital games? And often we have the same people working across, ELIT as well as digital games. Very, very quick examples would be would be Siddhartha, would be Shamo, myself, many others from Digra, India. So what are the connections there? And if there are any connections, is the digital game industry in India aware of ELIT? How far does it see itself as participating in ELIT? And I'm just saying that compare games, recent games such as Forgotten Fields, then Palace on the Hill, recently released. So these are all games which have a narrative component, a very kind of intense narrative component, a component whereby you make choices, but you have this visual world as well, and you make choices. So is the digital game industry even aware of ELIT? And are there synergies that we can think about? Can we think about digital literature broadly to include kind of digital games as well? Can we think about digital literature can we think about ELIT, but kind of separate it from kind of, other kinds of digital literature? And when we're talking about digital literature, can we also make it very nuanced, please, so that, PDFs, for example, ebooks or books that are digitized don't automatically kind of figure within digital literature. So all of these things are things that I was kind of thinking about. And that also brings me to 30, which is the Digital Humanities Alliance for Research and Teaching and Innovations, which is the organization which kind of coordinates dialogue about the digital humanities in India. And I think that this also comes in within the broader discussions of digital humanities. ELIT kind of comes within broader discussions of digital humanities, really. To also make people think in more nuanced manners about kind of what ELIT can do, what it is really, and what can we call ELIT, what can we not call ELIT, and how broad our church is, so on. So I'm just going to start by, kind of leaving some pointers, really, which I kind of thought which I have been kind of thinking about for a long time when I've been thinking about Elit in India. One of the things is that is recognition. And if you talk about the literary kind of, sort of accepted literary forums in India, then Elit does not really figure, right? So if you, for example, if you go to the Sahitya Academy, another formal, and I've recently been, and we'll come to that in a bit. But if we go to the Sahitya Academy, for example, we do not see any recognition of something like Elit, that it even exists, right? So there are, to my knowledge, there are digital literature awards in India, but not specifically for Elit. And digital literature awards are the digital literature can be any which thing, even digital screenplays for OTT. One of the recent awards that I was looking at was kind of awarded for writing OTT screenplays. So then within this milieu, when I think that digital literature is becoming something that India, kind of Indian cultural organizations are beginning to talk about, I think it's important to start spreading a general awareness of what Elit is. And I know that we've already started with this conference, with the workshop before this, but perhaps to a more non-academic community. And for that, I was also thinking of kind of doing introductory Elit classes or Elit kind of introductory kind of sessions on Elit in schools particularly, and also looking at university curricula and trying to get kind of, Elit included. This will also bring us to other issues, other problems, which I will come to my last point, basically. So then again, to talk about lit fests, literary festivals, I mean, there are like any which number of literary festivals in Kochi, in Jaipur, in Kolkata. There's so many literary festivals at the moment, and but none of them seem to kind of feature electronic literature anywhere, or even kind of I think when you look at their programs, you would think that it doesn't even exist, right? So, and then if we do have electronic literature, you see, electronic literature can be ephemeral. We were talking about Insta poetry earlier, and then we're talking about like hypertext fiction, video games. So how do you even kind of know what is there? And in India, we do not have an Elit archive, and that I think is my strong recommendation, that we, after we go back from here, we actually think of kind of to the Elit group in India as well, and to others gathered here, that we actually seriously start thinking about archiving, having a formal kind of curated archive of electronic literature. And having said this, now with India, there is a bigger challenge, which is Indian languages. Now you have many of the Indian languages now in Unicode, and Google even recognizes some of them with OCR, quite a few. I mean, with different levels of accuracy. But there are all these keyboards in Hindi, Bangla, Urdu, and the Tamil. So I think, I mean, it is eminently possible also to have Elit in Indian languages. And this is something that is maybe easier said than done. But then also, I mean, since I'm kind of like broadly kind of affiliated to the Electronic Literature Organization, the ELO, and particularly to kind of talk about its Indian activities, I think that it is also important to think about joining the consortium of electronic literature, so that we have a presence really in the global arena, and like many kind of global authorities, scholars have come here today, but wanted to keep that ongoing for kind of for the future as well. Also, to have new media writing competitions and unconferences, just like this is a conference, unconference, whatever you call it, but just like this is kind of an academic kind of venue, I think we should probably have something like a venue for creative writers, which would connect to my point about awards in Elit, about recognition of Elit, and of course, kind of then representing Elit in Lit Fests, and also then kind of having these kind of in Elit archives. But I think a really good model that works is the Global Game Jam, because that is at least something that is pretty religiously held in India. In different cities in India, people just kind of gather together at whatever venue we can find in Kolkata. We just go to the Webel office and spend a couple of nights there and just jam up, just try to make games. And that's it pretty much. So we're there for like about 2 days and we're making games. And that's kind of, it's competition. At the same time, it's kind of really, how do you say it, like really healthy collaboration. And I think if we do something for kind of Elit, that would be fantastic. And then I've been listening to these papers in the sessions today off and on. One of the things I kind of have to, it's not meant as a criticism, but I noticed that most of the papers they address the electronic literature in terms of traditional literature. So, but I think that electronic literature has a lot more going to it because of the mediality of literature. The media that electronic literature is using, hyperlinks, then images, then sound, then kind of multimedia, but then kind of and it's really great to analyze literature using Eliot's the way Eliot would have done kind of literary criticism, or F.R. Lewis or Pound and etc. Maybe even the more recent ones like Greenblatt. But then electronic literature has its own mediality, and I think that is something that we need to think about, especially when we are looking at university curricula as well, to think about methodologies of kind of teaching or kind of dealing with addressing Elit, not just teaching. And not just not just talk about Elit because social media has made electronic literature popular. Whether social media has made electronic literature popular or not, whether it's the pandemic, which has kind of made things kind of more, digitally, kind of when people more digitally savvy per force. I mean, electronic literature in itself, as itself, already has its identity. It has had it for a long, long time, for over 30 years, 40 years now, maybe 50 years, perhaps even, if you stretch it a little bit. But so that is, I think, something that I'm kind of looking at here. So these pointers, I'm just going to quickly go through a few examples. So I went to, you can see 12th January 2023. So I went on Thursday to the Sahitya Academy kind of program. I went there particularly because they had a session on digital literature. But you see, the three speakers didn't speak about digital literature much at all. One of them did actually speak about Zork and Colossal Cave and then Insta poetry. But barring that, the others didn't. The thing is that what strikes you is that it says young generation and digital literature. So the perception is that digital literature should always be associated with the young generation. Although one of the speakers did mention that he was no longer young, and well, like many of us would love to think of us as young, but then age is catching up with us. So and today on Facebook, I think Teresa Zonft just kind of commented that this whole thing about digital and the young is kind of a problematic one, because if you look at the origins of the internet in the ARPANET, I mean, it goes way back, like before many of us were even born. So that's again kind of this perception is a slightly problematic perception. And then I was a little cheeky. I asked whether Sahitya Academy would consider having a panel on video games as digital literature. So the response was that that wasn't a question that could be allowed. So, well, there we go. But that was predictable. But I'm just saying that the fact that there is an engagement with digital literature and that it is connected with the young generation is already a beginning. But where we take it, of course, I mean, how we move towards kind of the understanding of digital literature, and whether electronic literature kind of can be brought in here is something that is a challenge for us. When we speak of archiving, I wanted to say that, and for that, I think we need to have a really kind of well-curated body of electronic literature in an archive. And my own experience with the digital, electronic literature archive was Trace. When I was in Nottingham, it was housed in Nottingham Trent University, and my former boss, Sue Thomas, was one of the key figures in Trace. And Trace, and it still survives. I think it's hosted by Washington University or some at the moment. And Trace sadly left Nottingham Trent University around the time I joined. But what I saw was it was fascinating because it had like really, really rich works of literature from the very early days of Elit to the current times. And it's all there, and one can go there, one can kind of look at it. Something which is considered ephemeral is kind of preserved and kind of retained. So that was. And of course, this is my quick kind of pointer that if you look at the whole program of the Kolkata Literary Festival, there is no mention of electronic poetry, electronic. Although you'll see that some really, really novel kind of some really novel novels rather, really new literature is being featured here, but it's just kind of not doesn't include anything digital. So there we go. From puppetry to Durjoy Dotto, we have everything, but digital is just not there. I mean, interestingly, people in Bangladesh are actually starting to talk about digital storytelling in academic writing, and some of the games. I mean, and in Bangla as well, really. And now again, how they understand digital storytelling is another kind of thing to kind of discuss at length. But I'm just saying that this is not kind of, we're not the only people who are talking about electronic literature, digital literature here, but it's also there in outside of India and in kind of other Indian languages. But then I also wanted, because I'm not somebody from electronic literature, and I don't know if there are any Bangla electronic literature examples, really. I tried looking, honestly. I did my best on Google and anywhere else I could try, but I couldn't find anything in Bangla or in Hindi. So, and these are the two languages I know fairly well. But what I do know about is for video games. We have quite a few kind of now games that are being released in India. They're fantastic games. They have their problems, but let's not discuss those at the moment. But this is a game called Missing, and it is about trafficking, about women trafficking in Kolkata, in India. It's a very, very traumatic experience game, and I'd recommend that you all kind of, if you have a chance, have a go at it. Really, it's whether we can call it a game is kind of, again, another question. It was made by Flying Robot Studios around 2017-18. It's won many accolades globally and in the country. But why I mention this is that if you see Missing Game for a Cause gameplay and then the word Bangla, those of you who can read the Bangla font, the Bangla script. So it was actually localized. So there is this kind of this pressure of localizing Indian or localizing games in Indian languages. One of the really popular games which uses many artistic traditions from India, Rajasthani architecture, Tolu Bombalata puppetry from Andhra Pradesh, Javanese art, columns like from southern India, so on and so forth. Story of this little girl Raji, whose brother has been kidnapped by demons, and she is going to just rescue the demons with the help of gods Durga and Vishnu. Simple story, but Raji is a big success in the global market right now because of the way it uses local influences. But one of the criticisms against it was that it had localized in Turkish even, but not in Hindi. So there is now kind of a Hindi version as well of Raji. But this is beginning to happen. And like I said, I mean, again, video games are not exactly electronic literature, but they have a lot of similarities if you start with Zork and onwards. So they have a lot of similarities. And and this is something that is ongoing in the video game industry, and I think it is something that can also carry over into electronic literature. And like I said, that it's important that these two areas also kind of speak to each other. So again, Forgotten Fields, this is a game about kind of a guy who has a writer's block, so he can't write any longer. And he goes back to his hometown, Goa. His name incidentally is Sid. And he goes back to Goa, his hometown, the countryside of Goa, and he's just kind of taking in the nature. And it's just kind of very quotidian kind of activities that he's doing in the game. And that's all it is about. But it is also about making choices. So at every step in the game, you have like, you choose one option or you choose another option, and that's how the story goes on. So it's basically a story, an interactive story, an interactive fiction, really, with kind of digital art and kind of animation. So yeah, so this is where I kind of I'm going to kind of end just to say that I've kind of I don't want to sound preachy, but electronic literature has kind of way to go. But of course, with the work of all of you, Shamo, Sid, then all of Jamia and other places, it's kind of really doing very well. And again, with guidance from people such as Astrid and others, I'm sure we will kind of move quite far. But we are not yet there, and there is still ways to go, and there is a large kind of group of people. I just noticed that someone mentioned in passing that everyone uses mobile phones in India, everyone has smartphones. That's not true, really. And if they do use mobile phones, and there's often kind of this digital, analog good, digital bad sense, because one of the people at the digital literature panel in Sahitya Academy, she just kind of rose and she said that, but my son does not like to read on Zoom. We like to, we want to introduce him to paper books rather than Zoom, because Zoom kills his attention and so on. So this is we are conflating many different things with electronic literature, with digital literature. Zoom is not necessarily digital literature, but so all of these things need to be unpacked, unpicked, and also kind of I think we need to make more connections with kind of literary discourses in the analog, in the traditional kind of discourses, whether it is literary festivals, whether it is Sahitya Academy, and certainly I think we should promote kind of more digital literature writing, not just kind of conferencing and academic discussions, which is fantastic, but also writing of electronic literature and then archiving. So with that, I'll just kind of say thanks. Thanks a lot for having me here.
Thank you so much, Souvik. This was wonderful. you, as you pointed out, you began with the opinion that India is no country for e-literature. And starting from there to today, where you are ruminating about the question of what ails e-literature in India. And this was fascinating, and you made some very pertinent points. The first important point that you made was that usually in India we tend to confuse digitized print literature with digital literature or digitally born literature. So that confusion has to be removed. People need to understand what digital literature is, what e-literature is. That is a very significant point. And secondly, you pointed out again very important point that there is no acceptance for e-literature in India. We tend to dismiss e-literature as secondary, as casual. Even Insta poetry is not taken very seriously as yet in literary circles. So there is a need for recognition of e-literature. So that's very important. And thirdly, you argued that we need to curate e-literature in a more systematic way. So there is a need for archiving e-literature. That's also something that everyone who is interested needs to think about, especially in a country like India, where I don't know whether, I mean, we are not even familiar with the existence of e-literature in other Indian languages. Who knows? There might already be, enough e-literature. People might be writing which we have not really taken account of. So I think. E-literature is a field that needs more intellectual investment, and it needs to be taken more seriously. And with these remarks, I will move on to our second speaker, because I don't want to eat up into his time. It's already 2:45, and maybe after his presentation we can take up the questions from the chat box. Is that okay, Souvik?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry, I think did I over
It's
did I
fine.
take
That's
up?
fine. It was
Sorry,
very interesting. So
sorry
we
about
didn't want to interrupt.
that.
So we move on to Dr. Siddhartha Chakraborti. Dr. Siddhartha Chakraborti is Assistant Professor at the Department of English, Aligarh Muslim University. His interest and research areas are post-colonialism, subaltern studies, digital literature, and gaming narratives. He has helped design 10 new courses at AMU, and including one on digital literature. He recently bagged a Gyan project at AMU in the area of digital literature, and let me share this with all of you that this conference is also owed to the workshop that he organized, and from where our colleague Shimi Monedole got very interested into the field of digital literature, e-literature. So welcome, Dr. Siddhartha Chakraborti. I will pass the floor to you. Please take it.
Right, I should be audible now. Can you hear me?
Perfectly audible.
Right, wonderful. And I think you can see me, and you can also see the slide. So let me just make sure that we have this on full screen. Just give me 1 second, please. Yeah, thank you. So now I think I'm perfectly audible, and the slide is also there. Right. So at the very outset, I must thank Shimi ma'am for inviting me for this plenary talk. It's a huge honor for me, and it's always a pleasure to talk about e-literature anytime. And as I can see, she has also done a wonderful job in rounding up the gang, as they say. So it's wonderful to have Professor Astrid Enslin here right now. I mean, she actually started the whole thing. I mean, if you really think of e-literature and discourses around e-literature, you have to go back to Astrid. She's done the work in this field. And particularly in India, e-literature started off with the UKRE project way back in 2011, which involved Professor Shogoto Bhaduri. And Bhaduri's name usually does not feature, but he's there somewhere at the back. And that is where, Deep, Kwabena, Astrid, I mean, a lot of the people who are now working actively, across in many countries, many continents, in our own ways, in our own institutions, we've been trying to, get some space. Some of us has found some space, and like in AMU, we were fortunate that at that time the chairperson, Professor Simi Hassan, allowed us to set up a course. I mean, and that's also a very unusual thing. I mean, I know that Souvik tried for many years in presidency and it did not happen. It's not because he was not trying. It's just that institutions often just lock you out. I'm also very grateful to my students, because out of the 64 paper presentations, I believe some 5 are from AMU, and they're all master students. And they're all mostly master students who are presenting. So that's wonderful. I'm sure that such programs, and the fact that another central university is at least in the fray now. Jamia is also in the fray. They are also, and Professor Zaidi's book, I think that was a very important compendium. I've read that book. I've read Shovik's article. I've read all the articles, Nivedita ma'am's article and all. I think that book is a seminal handbook. I mean, that's a wonderful job, Professor Zaidi. I mean, you have done some really, really interesting work in getting that volume together, and I really recommend that everyone goes through it. I mean, if you're interested in e-literature, you have to have a look at that book. There's no way that you can proceed without it. It's really, really important. So some really wonderful work has been happening, and it's great to have everyone on the same podium. Souvik has already taken everyone's name, so I won't really do that again. But yes, it's a difficult task, and it's an uphill fight to just keep courses going. But now things have changed, and I really want to sort of emphasize that there has been a change, and we have to recognize that from a time when we were pariahs, I mean, quite literally, we were on the outside of the the board of studies, hoping that someone will pick up something, and to a situation where now, me personally, I have been approached by at least 3 different universities that either they're setting up a full-fledged course like a bachelor's or a master's, or some people are saying, okay, at least within English, we want to have some paper on digital literature, and many other places who are including texts which are digital in their existing courses on, let's say, post-colonialism or gender studies or other things, right? So there is suddenly, and this sea change has happened because of many factors, and we'll get to that, but there has been a change. And today my lecture really therefore is not about the importance of e-literature. I think that has been addressed. That has been done by Professor Zaidi and her book. It's been done by Professor Nivedita Menon and the work she's put in behind Dharti. Dibboduti, in Leeds, I mean, he's played a very strong seminal role in getting that entire thing together. So that work has been done. Let's sort of accept that e-literature is now here, and it's here to stay. But at the same time, there seems to be a lot of hesitancy, and people are sort of like, what on earth is this electronic literature? Ye kya hai? What is this? What is this strange bird? How do we sort of get to it, and what do we sort of look at? And and because we are in English, and that's also a problem and a blessing. So it's a two-way thing, because electronic literature need not only be in English. In fact, Tripura Central University is doing some brilliant work out of the Department of Bengali, and that's wonderful. And I'm sure that there are other spaces, like for example, the entire Rekhta project. I mean, we have to look at that, sterling work in e-literature which is happening in Urdu, right? So there are other spaces, and maybe we are not talking about them enough, and maybe we don't know enough about them. But various regional languages, I recently read about a wonderful project which is happening in Tamil. So there is a lot of e-literature happening in the regional literatures as well. But because we are in English, where better to start from than from Shakespeare? So on this provocative title, O Elit, wherefore art thou electronic? Deny thy father and refuse thy name, and you should do something about it. So on that provocative title, I would like to begin on this question of what really is this business of digitality, and why is it that so what is this business of digital? So at the base of it all, at the base of it's basically a system of keeping count, right? So you're keeping count of some things. What does a computer do? It keeps count. Okay, and that's why it's called a computer. It computes, right? And using certain computational algorithms and using certain representational forms, it is able to churn out huge amounts of data and information, right? And it usually, and we usually think of keeping counts in base 10. That's because we have 10 digits, right? But it's not that all of humanity has been counting in base 10. So there are, of course, many differences, and some of this you would already know. For example, we count our minutes in 60s. Why do we do it? It comes from the Babylonians. Okay, the French used to count in a system called the vigesimal system, which comes from Celtic counting, and is also common with the Mayan system. But now they have sort of shifted to a system which is based until 60, and after that they do in 20s. This is very interesting system called the Shepherd system, which is counting in 5. Okay, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, because there's no 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, then go to 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then 20. So they're counting in sets of 5. And this is prevalent in Scotland, right? So there is no need that we must count everything in tens. So digitality, as you think of counting, is not a uniform idea. It's not a uniform way of imaginary of thinking. And I'm borrowing this word imaginary from Cornelius Castoriadis and his idea of social imaginaries, and how imaginaries actually form a way in which we receive and actually, read and even interact across things, which are all texts, because we are in literature, it's easier to think of it that way. So, and of course, we would already know that the computer counts in twos. So it only counts in binaries, the only zeros and ones. Does that really make a difference on the grand thing? I mean, yes, it does, but not always, not really. And it's quite interesting because if you can put everything in binaries, zeros and ones, they are somehow in a dialectical process, and which has its own ideological implications. But coming back, the other term, which also has people up in arms, is this idea of electronic, right? And electronic, very interestingly, comes from an Arabic word for amber. Okay, and amber, we would know, is tree sap which has sort of dried out and it's become hard. And I'm sure many people here would have jewelry made from amber. I unfortunately am not rich enough, so I don't have any of those. But right from the beginning, the amber has been seen as an exotic element, something which gives you status, gives you some sort of prestige. And the original, Arabic meaning, as I have been told, I really don't know any Arabic, but I have been informed by people who know very good Arabic that it refers to stature or height. So having amber would signify that you are somebody of an upper class, or somebody of maybe of the feudal hierarchy, someone who's somewhat, in higher up in society, right? And my argument somewhere is that perhaps we need to also think of this meaning of electronic, particularly when we are talking about digital. Who wants to take up civil engineering anymore? Is an old question. I think it's a 30-year-old question. You want to take up electronic. Why? We don't know, because all the engineers seem to become financial consultants, or they become advertisement agents, and they do things that we should be doing. But so there really is no one constructing bridges. I mean, I can say this from first-hand information. Most of our students, and we have a wonderful engineering college, they get really highly placed jobs in finance, which is not, which has nothing to do with their training. They've been trained as engineers, but no one is doing any engineering. I mean, they're all doing finance, or they're doing other things, PR, management, those sorts of things, which is stuff that we really talk about. I mean, in the English department, that's what we really talk about. Humanities, that's what this is for. Anyway, so an amber not only is seen as a stature thing, but it is also a deified thing. Okay, so it's also something which is religiously sort of sanctioned, and you'll actually find amber as a part of certain processes in various religions. But I'm giving a textual reference, which is from Ezekiel 1:4, which is of course from the Bible, but it refers to a certain vision of Christ, where the color of amber is used to describe whatever that vision of Christ that he has. Right. So there is a certain deification. So it's not only just exaltation in a class sense, but there's something mystic about it. Okay. And also add to it that, of course, there's something Eastern coming from Arabic, the Orient, so all of those sorts of connotations as well somewhere. And when it initially comes into its usage, it comes in from magnetism. And we would know that amber, if you sort of rub it, it produces static electricity, which lasts for a long time, right? So it would be seen as something that can move objects on its own, So it has this power of, moving things from a distance, some sort of a, strange force, which of course now we know can be explained very well using physics, But whatever. So all those, sorts of imaginaries regarding amber, which exist for the last 10,000 years in human psyche, would remain somewhere. It would remain some. The next contention which I would like to put forward is that so just like digital and electronic don't really have those sorts of the same connotations that we think of directly. Similarly, when you think of the idea of objectivity, or some sort of factuality or some stability in literature because of the digital or the electronic, that also does not really happen. And in particular, I'm talking about the use of distant reading as a tool, right? So distant reading, as you would know, Franco Moretti has the textbook on it, and he sort of distant reads many different sorts of texts. I've shared this link for a tool which all of you can use, and it's free of cost. It's online. It's called Voyant Tools. I have shared it in the chat box as well. If you're on a machine which can access it, please do open it. Please do open it right now. So you can use it in your classroom. You can take a large piece of text, a large corpus, and you can post it in, and you can see the sort of results that come out. It's pretty self-explanatory. Incidentally, I've been teaching this a little bit in IIT Jodhpur recently, but it's a very simple tool to use, and you'll soon realize that distant reading is not really as distant as you would like it to be. And this is one of the primary attacks which have happened on Moretti, because Moretti himself doesn't do distant reading. He first reads the text, he knows what's there in the text, then he puts the same text inside the machine, and then he says, okay, see, these are the things which we can sort of interpolate. So it's a pre-read and then a reread sort of a interpretation, right? So and some of the answers which he comes up with are completely mind-blowing. I mean, I don't even know if they're relevant for literary studies. For example, he defines Gothic novels in terms of the higher incidence of the use of certain prepositions, all right, which is an incredible idea. I mean, it's incidental, but does it really define what Gothic literature is? And I'm sure as literature students, and we have all studied what the features of Gothic novels are, we wouldn't be hesitant to produce or to accept these sorts of definitions as classroom definitions to be given to students when we are teaching, right? So this idea that use of digital, the use of electronic in our reading of literature with a capital L, and I'm emphasizing again, literature with a capital L does not work as like literature with the small l. So this, because it's figurative, it's metaphorical, there are other things happening, and they need to be close read. All right. So let's just sort of keep this also somewhere. Unlike, and this is where distant reading really shines. So let's say you want to create a profile of users. All right. Let's say you want to create data about many people, and you want to sort of sort it together, and you want to categorize people into various things. And this is particularly done in our society on two counts. Okay. So, and both are counts which are an extension of our politico-economical imaginary, which is liberal democracy with the free market, right? So when it comes to what we want to buy, all right, you'll see that you're bombarded with very specific ads, almost like someone is hearing you as you speak. So you have a conversation, and you can try doing this. Have a conversation with a couple of friends and just keep saying headphone, and you'll suddenly see whether you're on Twitter or you're on Facebook or you're on whatever. You can take it up, and I'm sorry I've mentioned a couple of names, but you're on, let's say, any particular social media site. Even on Tinder, you're swiping away at something else, and along comes an ad for headphones. Now someone is listening to us, someone is hearing us, someone can almost prejudge what we want before we want it. And this is a very interesting sort of a development. The second thing that this allows for, and this also we would know by now because of Cambridge and Analytica and the entire sort of fracas which came out with the Trump election, and after that voting patterns and gerrymandering using these data has been a pretty usual sort of a practice, at least in the West. In India, constituency lines are already drawn, so it's not that extensive, but nonetheless you can, and of course we would have friends who are working for various political parties, and they'll tell you that this is common practice. They will profile their particular voters, and they'll try to figure out who they are based on what you're buying. I mean, let's think of it. Somebody who's buying a book which is very obviously about liberal ideology will want to vote a certain way. Somebody who's buying a book which is particularly related to a certain sort of ideology is likely to vote a particular way. And these sorts of profile, not only on a single purchase, but over lifelong purchases, using networks of buying patterns, not just one buying patterns, also rooting in what food you're eating, because that data is coming from somewhere else, will together create a profile which is incredibly complex and will probably know you right now better than how you know yourself. Right? And this is something that distant reading does work for. So, but this is literature with a small l. I would like to again emphasize that. Now, the next bit is that this entire thing of digital and electronic literature is something very new, and this is something that many people particularly people who are looking at it for the first time, they're like, oh, this must be something really different, something really difficult. Iske liye coding chahiye hoga. You'll need to know some coding in order to access it. I mean, there was a time when a lot of e-literature would have to be accessed through certain codes, but not anymore. I mean, a lot of it is available to be, sort of read using virtual machines which mimic older softwares which have disappeared. And of course, there's that entire thing about e-literature disappearing. But the imaginaries of literature, and we have to think about this, we never talk about paper literature, right? We never talk about, although that is a very important thing. I mean, print capital and all of that, we have that. I mean, it's there in the syllabus as well. I'm sure that we are reading about how the publishing industry has changed things. We constantly read about how the Renaissance came about because of printing, but we have never really used this terminology, paper literature, right? And why have we not? Is there a reason for it? The second thing is there are certain imaginaries of reading and reading cultures. How do we read the text? We open a book, or we smell a book, or we sit in a corner and we read, or we open a laptop and we read text from point A to point B across the screen. Then we go to the next line. We don't want to constantly click somewhere and go somewhere else. That's something that happens on Wikipedia when you're looking for something and you land up reading about Neil Armstrong on the moon for no reason, because you clicked on the wrong places, right? So this idea of hyperlink reading being pleasurable as bringing jouissance is also something that needs to be questioned. It may not really be true. In fact, what many people are trying to do is simply read. They're trying to stay within that imaginary of reading, or that imaginary of reading culture, which is already pre-existing, right? The other thing is many of the tools of digital literature, and when someone asks what are the things that makes literature digital, the answers are like, hypertext, or you sort of have to do something on the text and the text will change, something will happen, that it can branch out into various endings, or it can loop in on itself. All of these are things which have already happened in the analog, right? And they have major authors have done it. So you look at separate endings. I mean, you would know Dickens has done it, Hardy's done it. Of course, the extent of the sort of branching, the amount of detail and complications which are possible, that would be far less in the analog than it would be in the digital. But even a kid's book, if you take up a kid's book, you'll find, lift up this flap and there'll be some text below it, right? Pull out this wing and something happens, the animal stands up. So these sorts of 3D books and all, they already exist in the analog. It's not like they do not. Right? So it's not something which is completely alien. It's not something which is completely different. It's something that anyone can read, anyone can access, anyone can look at it. We must encourage that sort of reading, that you must actually read e-literature text. And also, I mean, do we at all want to have this term electronic or digital added on in front of literature? I mean, take up a field like architecture. I was working on this project. In fact, we had presented it, I think, in the first DHAI conference, which was held in IIT Indore. And it's with architect Mr. Faraz Farooq. He's a faculty in the Department of Architecture. And we had created a 3D virtual museum of the Musa Dakri, which is a very famous museum in Aligarh Muslim University. In fact, AMU has 3 major museums. It's an incredible campus. Must come and see it. So we had recreated that entire room in 3 dimensions. So you can sort of wearing AR glasses, or alternatively using your phone, you can actually walk across an empty space and you can walk across that room and see all the exhibits which are there and get some information of those exhibits, right? So of course, I really didn't do much. It was mostly Faraz's work. I was only writing the copyright. But in architecture, no one says digital architecture. I mean, it's implied that architecture must be digital. And although Faraz told me that when he studied architecture, they actually learned how to do it using, scales and pencils and all these sorts of, angle machines and things like that, right? So he knows how to do it in an analog manner, but he says no one does it anymore. Everyone uses AutoCAD. We use all these softwares and they do the entire thing, and see, we can create it for you so easily, right? So we don't use it anymore. Mathematics, let's say, I mean, I have friends who are teaching mathematics and they would know flowcharts and they use computer programs regularly in order to attack, big complicated mathematical problems, which are often very simply stated. All right. Banking, I mean, we don't really talk about digital banking. We did for some time, until the COVID hit. And once COVID finished, now I think we are all comfortable with banking is what it is. Or say photography. And I remember when I had, started photography, there were magazines called digital photography. So it was considered as a separate genre of photography, which had its own eccentricities and so on. But nowadays, no one will use this term. In fact, now people will say film photography in order to say that, no, you're not doing digital photography. What you're doing is something different. So in order to point that out, that person will have to actually say film photography. Okay? So is it that we are sort of, literature is, at least maybe in India, I'm not sure I should comment for the West, but maybe in India, the digitization process is happening a little late in this particular field. Maybe in another 10 years, it will be absurd to say digital literature. Maybe we'll assume that, of course, you're studying a course on Shakespeare, and we must have some e-literature text as well. Maybe we'll take it as a granted thing. It would be there in your syllabus. Just like nowadays, having a separate course maybe on gender studies may not be important. It's already there in each and every course that we teach, right? So, not that there should not be a separate course. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it's already all pervasive, and maybe that is how all pervasive this field too will potentially become, right? But at the same time, having said all of this, there is a very interesting a sort of possibilities which this medium allows for. And of course, we know Marshall McLuhan and what he said, and I have also shared these two links with you. The first link is an open source text for Begum Ruqayyah's Sultana's Dream, which I believe is in the syllabus of many of the universities. It's perhaps the first proto-feminist or feminist work, whatever you would like to call it, which comes out of India, right? And you can, I'm sure you've read the text. If you have not, you can quickly open it and have a glance at it. The second text is a very interesting text. Again, this is linked with CSSS. And again, going back to Souvik, I'm sure Souvik would remember when this text was made. So he was probably a part of the creation of this text. And this is a absolutely brilliant piece of text. So please, if you could open this, then we can have a look at this text. I want to see a little bit of text instead of just talking about things. So what I want to do is I'm just trying to open it over here in case you guys are not being able to open it for whatever reason. This is a text which was created by Arfa, and Arfa was one of the speakers course about her work, sort of thing, work that she's doing. The initial bit is in Flash, and it's there's a sort of a Flash movie which sort of starts playing. So when you sort of begin off, is this visible? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, but I think you are only sharing your PPT tab. That is why the other one is not visible.
Oh, acha, I'm so very sorry. Hang on. I'll have to. I'm really sorry for the wait. Right. Is it working now?
Yeah. However, there is no audio.
Right. I'll sort of stop over here, and I'll just sort of try and demonstrate the other, a couple of chapters. All right. And I love this, roti thing, because the problem is we start off wrong in nursery, right? Am I audible, Shamma?
Yeah.
All right. So we start off wrong right in the beginning, right? So Papa ka paisa gol gol, mummy ki roti gol gol, and we've sort of ruined our entire thing for eternity. फिर masters में आके बदलना बहुत मुश्किल होता है. So but there are these small nuanced sort of things which Afra is doing. Afra Shafiq is a wonderful resource. I mean, and I really think that if you are considering teaching Elit in the department, this is a wonderful text. In fact, we have it on the AMU syllabus now. We'll be teaching it this year. I mean, but teaching is a difficult thing to talk about the e-literature text, but we'll sort of navigate this together with the students. That I think will be a better way. So you'll see there are embedded videos, all right? There are texts. All these images are essentially a bricolage of archival images which were taken out from the CSSS library. She went to CSSS, she found all of this, spent a lot of time figuring out how they wanted to, sort of place it. And this talks about what is called the Andar Mahal, right? The Zanana, the space of women, and it's in the in late colonial Bengal, and it talks about how women would behave with each other in a world where there are no men, which is precisely what Begum Ruqayyah's novella is also about. So it's not really a rewriting, it's not a translation of Sultana's dream, but rather it's a and but it deals with things using absolutely archival stuff. And you can see, I mean, this is just to conceive of this and to think of how you're putting in all these images and making sense of it. It's just incredible. I mean, this, for example, would remind you of Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, sort of image. Imagine women are up to when they're left onto their own and watching. And this idea of freedom away from the male gaze is sort of all pervasive, but also, all these things about the conversation, the banter, and the fact that there is a possibility of having a life without having men all over the place, right? Which is also what Begum Ruqayyah is talking about. And all stuff, all these poetry, all these things are there from archival materials, right? So as you can see, this is being read, but it's also being played. I mean, there is this cursor. I don't know if you can see the cursor. This is actually Afra herself. And whenever you can click on something, it turns into a book. So if you come here and you click, you'll get that archival thing. So this is the original archival document which was taken up and it's been put in, right? And this is an incredibly dense text. I mean, so I don't know whether I'll be able to. There are jokes, there are puns. There's a sort of there's a very strong humor which sort of goes through the text, and it's absolutely incredible. I mean, this is something that I really recommend that all of you open it on your own and have a look. Right. So, and e-literature uses the same things and all of that, but as I'm demonstrating, there is of course something which is majorly different, which is possible. I mean, let's not shy away from that, and let's sort of also enjoy what is happening over here and how we are being able to access it and how we are being able to read this particular or read or play or navigate this particular text. All right. So and how am I doing for time? Can we go through another chapter?
If you could conclude in another 2 minutes, we could have a 10-minute.
Okay, right. So I definitely cannot go through another chapter at all. So I will stop sharing this particular thing and let me. I'm sorry for. And let's just go back to the presentation. I think we should be back at the PPT. So you can have a look at this. Now, at the same time, the other thing is electronic literature as a platform, and we spoke about this a little bit when we had the session in the morning, and somebody was talking about how e-literature gives a platform. So again, I would like to differentiate between literature with capital literature with a small L. So electronic literature has become like, it's a mass platform, right? So we have our Skari uncles, I'm sure, Tehzeeb wale chacha, whatever you would like to call him, sitting on top of these hordes of e-literature, which are regularly sent to you, early in the morning before you wake up, in order to ensure that you're going in the right direction. So that would also be a sort of an empowerment of some sort. I mean, I'm sure with all the puns added. But at the same time, what is considered high literature, for that, uh, electronic is still a fringe platform. I mean, let's be honest, who looks at e-literature, right? It's a very small group of people. And even in the West, even in the advanced, technologically advanced countries where everybody would have a computer, maybe, 30 years back, e-literature has not been the dominant form of articulation. It's not even been close to mainstream, right? So to think that it will be the mainstream form of consumption, and sometime maybe with changes in technology, there'll be more text which will be presented on but the formatting would possibly remain similar, because the expectations of reading, as I was talking, the imaginaries of reading and reading cultures, they sort of remain. And we just saw this text by Afra, right? So Afra's text is a little unsettling. You don't know what to do with it. Should I see it? Should I read it? Should I listen to it? Should I click here? Should I not? It can be a little overwhelming, right? But nonetheless, electronic literature, has engendered publishing in the real world. And I'll give an example, which is from my particular passion, which is gaming, which is the same as Shovik's passion. So Metro 2033 came out as a e-novel on a website, right? And it's by an author named Dmitry Glukovsky, and Glukovsky could not get anyone to publish him, so he just published it online, and it started raking up hits. So people started coming and seeing it, and he managed to collect over 2 lakh or something like that, in 2 years. And eventually he was published by Exmo, and Exmo is one of the biggest Russian publishing houses. And now there's a game franchise. There's a 3-game franchise. I of course got to know about it from the game. I played the game. It's a wonderful post-apocalyptic game. Post-apocalypse is also Dibbo's area. So we had some wonderful conversations, and it's also being turned into a movie, right? But the question really is that, is this empowerment? I mean, is this Glukovsky on his own, isolated, solitary, sitting in a corner, individually asserting his literary ideas, which was miraculously picked up by all these other like-minded people who sort of, created a resonance chamber and propelled him into, gaming and, movie making fame? Not really. Let's just hold on. So there are other forces at play. There are other ways of the system, and that's how the system works. So there is the invisible hand, somewhere, which is not so invisible, which is dependent on other things. So we need to be careful about how we ascribe any democratic or any freedom logic or emancipatory logic in itself to the medium. It's a medium. The medium will always be controlled by the politics of the day. So we have to have that in mind when we think of this, right? So anxieties of literature without the electronic digital, and this is where we had sort of started off from. All of a sudden, we, especially after COVID, just because it makes it easier for the state to keep a tab on what's happening, because everything is being recorded, right? So whatever I'm saying, I'm saying I have to be very careful. I cannot say exactly what I would want to say, otherwise I'm being heard. Big brother, big sister, and big everyone is not only watching and hearing their recording, and it's there, it's written on top that you're being recorded. So this creates a certain sort of neutered academia, for the want of a better term. And this is something that we need to be a little careful about. The second thing is there's always preferential funding. And that's why I really believe that a lot of departments are saying, let's just do something digital, dal ke kuch bana dete. It's like a chutney, the latest flavor is digital, and let's just put it in. And, if we don't do it, someone else will, might as well get published. And we did a very interesting study here in AMU. So we collected over 86 articles which have been published in, papers and in journals and books, collected editions, which are all written by Indian authors. Okay, so they're all by Indian authors. And we found barely, out of that 76, barely 7 or 8 talk about text. So there is no text being talked about. Right? In fact, nobody knows where the text is. We are having a huge conversation on literature, let's say, but there are no No one knows where the e-texts are, how to access them. No one seems to be reading them, right? So this is really pure simulation, simulated academia. And also because of the pressures of publication, publish or perish, aapka promotion nahi hoga, kuch nahi hoga, and so on and so forth, right? So there seems to be this, generally, some general platitudes attached and you have some publication out. And this seems to be something which is happening. And I'm sure that all the senior professors would know about it, and they would be guarding themselves and their scholars against that sort of scholarship. But this is something which is happening, and this is something we need to be, sort of worried about. But on the positive side, because so little work has happened, there is really a lot of space for work. So I really don't have a conclusion, but now I must sort of wind up. So, just to think about a couple of things. So there is a lot which is being carried forward from the analog to the digital. So let's not think of it as some sort of a great radical break, which it isn't. In fact, the form is the same. Just like photography, the rules of photography remain the same, whether you're doing it on digital or on film. And this is something any photographer will come and tell you. The rules of architecture remain the same. I mean, whether you are designing on pen and paper or you're designing the thing on software. We need to be aware of the potential and the possibilities of the medium. And as I demonstrated, this is a very vibrant medium because it allows intermediality in a completely different. You can have multiple mediums being bombarded at a reader or a listener. So it can be very overwhelming, right? We have to be aware of the politics of the medium. That's another very important thing. Can't treat the medium as inert. This is not an inert medium. There's a lot of surveillance, a lot of other things which are going on, a lot of pushing, capital inflows, a lot of other things which are going on. We need to be careful about that. We need to read Elit. And this is really the elephant in the room. We need to read more Elit. We need to get everyone to read Elit, because otherwise no one has read a text. We are talking about things that no one has seen or read of. It's not going to go anywhere. We have to read. And something Lenin had said, read and read. Okay, so I mean, going back to that, Lenin's message on Children's Day, maybe e-literature is not as alien as you thought. And that is the positive note that I would like to leave you all with. It's not as alien as you would like to think, So just like, Juliet, was like, if not electronic. So if you can just say that, if the word electronic was not there, and if you sort of realize that it's coming from the same place, it's not coming from some different place, perhaps, you would be able to love it better. And you won't think of yourself as some sort of a non-digital analog reader. So on that note, I would like to thank you for your patient hearing. This is always the toughest session to speak on, because this is a session after lunch. And this is infamously the session when everyone goes for a snooze. So thank you for a patient hearing. I would like, I'm free for any questions which you may have. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Chakraborti. This was such a fascinating talk, and I'm sure everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. And trust me, nobody could have, gone off to sleep in this session. Now, without much ado, I'll invite the rapporteurs to read out the questions from the chat box, because I could see that there are already a few questions for